Hello, Internet, and welcome to another Wednesday serial. This time, I want to talk to you about 1990 through 1991 Green Lantern. So, before I get into actually talking about the books, I should actually talk about the collection of the books. It's a short story. I was on eBay and I wanted to buy some Green Lantern comics. And I don't know how you shop for comics, but I like to just, avoid the hunt, avoid all that nonsense. I found a nice little bidding listing for an amount and bought it. I guess I could go a little deeper. So there was one lot that I found for this third volume of Green Lantern, nearly 200 issues. It would have not been bagged and boarded, but it was for a bit less than the one I actually paid for. But the guy sold it right before I pulled the trigger on it because I found it and I was like, I think I want this. I don't. I should wait for my next paycheck to come in. I didn't know. I didn't realize it was actually like a super good price. So I went ahead, did a lot of digging through eBay, found a few new tricks to find things on eBay. I found a similar listing. It was a chunk of change for getting the entire volume at once, but by and large, lots of fun. And I got something a little more expensive, but they all came bagged and boarded. And I believe in general, better condition. My issue number 5 that I've gotten to so far is a little extra beat up, but not too worried about it. So I don't know. I've been having some fun with going through eBay listings for Green Lantern. Once everything's told and shows up, I'll have most Green Lantern comics from, I believe, 89 till present. So that's a good chunk, I'd say. So let's take a moment to talk about where Green Lantern was in 1990 because you had, of course, your Volume 1 kind of Green Lantern spinning out of, I believe, it was All Star Comics, where you had Alan Scott, the original Green Lantern, which was just Green Lantern, supposed to be a bit oriental, da da da. I don't know it all, but it was Alan Scott. It was the Golden Age Green Lantern. And then eventually in a DC Showcase, we get Hal Jordan. And the bigger part, actually, than Hal Jordan himself is the idea of the Green Lantern Corps. So it moves the idea of the Green Lantern, this ring that can do, it can create anything you put your mind to, just green, with a few other effects, obviously. But it moves that from a mystical to a science fiction, which is kind of funny when you think about it, because that's pretty soft science fiction, right? If you're just replacing magic with like, no, it's alien technology. Don't think about it too hard. But the fun idea of the Green Lantern Corps is it brings in all these different aliens. It brings in kind of a supporting cast and supporting thing, and it expands the DC universe. I think it's really interesting because, in a way, Green Lantern is undoubtedly one of DC's bigger properties. Obviously, not as big as maybe some of its more core. I mean, it's never Batman, it's never Superman. I'd argue Green Lantern's been bigger than Wonder Woman, though. Bigger than The Question, certainly. So, up there. Parallel with maybe a league of like The Flash. Though The Flash and Green Arrow, I'd argue, are kind of bigger right now, especially with the TV shows and whatnot. So, I don't know. But before the TV shows were as big, Green Lantern was bigger with a whole kind of Pantheon books when Jeff Johns was on it. But that's later than the books we're talking about. So, okay, there's Volume 1, Alan Scott. There's Volume 2, basically, where you build up the Green Lantern Corps and all that. The Green Lantern Corps has had a book at this point. It's little offshoot. I think it lasts like 30 issues or so. And they'd kind of let the idea of the Green Lantern flounder. The idea is that for every sector, there's one or two Green Lanterns. They kind of break this for Earth a lot because it's where we're focused, it's where we care. I think in order to accept the Green Lantern, you have to bend the rules around Earth a little bit to have more Earth characters. It makes sense, but it's kind of annoying. But also, DC also has kind of justified it with the amount of nonsense that happens around Earth compared to anywhere else. So I think that's fun. Uh, you come in, and so Hal had been the main Green Lantern for a long time, and in Justice League International running, Guy Gardner, who's a heel, is kind of the known Green Lantern. He's the guy coming around. And we also have had John Stewart, you know, the black guy who's the Green Lantern. That's kind of his MO. But I think it's notable and interesting. So Hal Jordan, who's kind of your quintessential stiff-chinned uh, guy, normal white guy hero, um, has a job that's enviable, but isn't like Bruce Wayne. He's not a millionaire, you know. He's not a journalist. He's he's a test pilot. He has this job and background that is enviable, but not kind of giving him a ton of access or skills beyond someone else. So I think it puts him, you know, above average Joe, but feels more approachable and more, in a way, more enviable for that than like the superhuman limits of Superman or Batman. This is a guy with an extraordinary tool at his disposal, and that's kind of the core of what makes Hal Jordan tick as a character and a superhero. Guy's fun because you have this guy who has supposedly the most amazing weapon in the universe. That's what the Green Lantern rings are considered, and so he's a heel, right? He's a goof. He's the guy who Batman takes out in one punch, famously. Like, he's a guy basically no one likes, but they put up with because at the end of the day, he's doing more good than harm most days. So it's fun to have that kind of light antagonism running. And then John Stewart, I haven't read any of that early stuff, and I'm excited to get to Mosaic that's in here. Yeah, man, I'm kind of curious to learn more about him, but he seemed to be more honorable, but has a different perspective, and it's interesting because he was an architect, which I think fits the idea of the Green Lantern very interestingly. So he tends to have ideas about how to construct things that's more in depth, and I think that's fun. And they play with that a bit more once you get, especially to Kyle Rayner, which is years later, but in this run, how these different characters use their constructs differently, which is really fun because that makes the action, how they solve these problems, in a way, aspects of their character, in a way that's more on the face than other stuff. Sorry, more preamble, but this is a thought that's been rattling with me. So, I was kind of wondering why I felt the need to scratch the itch and get so much Green Lantern. And I realized what it was is that I'm a big Star Trek fan, or was. I grew up on Next Generation, loved DS9. That's absolutely one of my favorite shows of all time. Then there was Voyager. I've enjoyed other stuff, you know, Enterprise, some of the movies. You know, I enjoy all that. But lately and for years, Star Trek has kind of become this other thing. It's become another Battlestar Galactica or something, just big action in space, and there's some callbacks to what was, but the idea of the utopian, the idea of this aspirational sci-fi, I guess, has really been lost. And with that, my love and care for all that went. And I think part of me was like emotionally on some level, like, I need to replace that with something. And of course, the first place my mind goes, what I love is comics, you know, big superhero comics. What's the closest thing to that, right? What's the thing that they've crossed over with Star Trek? Green Lantern. So I think I just started reaching out, and I just kind of want to dive into the mythos and all that. It's a lot softer sci-fi. Not that say that Star Trek's hard sci-fi by any measure, but closer to than basically mystical rings. But there's a lot of fun there. So I'm just diving in, picking a point. I'm actually going to backtrack a little bit. And so here's where we get more into the comic part. So just preceding this third volume of Green Lantern was a mini series, which is kind of a echo of how Green Lantern goes. There's kind of a mini series or feature. In the olden days, it was like a feature in another comic, and then it would roll into one of the volumes, which is more how comics were done. I mean, technically, Superman was only part of Action Comics, right? Really became his book after a while, but yeah, same with Detective for Batman. But in this case, there was this miniseries, Emerald Dawn, that really refocused Hal Jordan, kind of cleaned up and made continuity of his origin and where he's at. Because you have to remember, this is rolling into a, excuse me, initial post-crisis world where they're building continuity and kind of building the world from go, while kind of rolling in the standard operating procedure of these characters at the same time. And so, you had so much with Superman that did change more so than other characters, I'd say. Some interesting takes with Batman, but for Green Lantern, it was kind of a way for them to maybe set a little more standard. Maybe, I don't want to say make the world darker per se, but I give things a little more grounding and a little more weight. And it was an interesting kind of mission statement and probably a marketing test to see how people like this idea of the Green Lantern. Now, there's an Emerald Dawn 2, and I have to be honest, I don't know quite where that fits in with the continuity of everything, but Emerald Dawn does take place right before this Green Lantern, and it is the first time that we get a fully fledged, not first time ever, but the first time we get the full kind of like brought out Hal versus Sinestro and that pull through with Abin Sur, in a bigger way. So it really reestablishes that and builds it up. Whew. Okay, so you get to Green Lantern 1, and you'll notice here there's Hal, and then there's John, and then there's Guy kind of right here. This is fun because this in the first few issues, I'd say, almost feel like a Vertigo book. This is Hal Jordan kind of wandering the planet, saying, the ring has for too long kind of controlled his life, and he wants to step back and be Hal Jordan again, just live. And so he's literally wandering the streets, walking along, looking for odd jobs, and just trying to get by. A man of the road. And it's kind of interesting because he's doing this, but one of the stops he does right before doing so is to stop by Justice League headquarters, and in doing so pisses off Guy. He's like, what do you mean you want to be Green Lantern, and da, da, da. And I just, it's kind of a fun rivalry thing, but it's not like dire straits right out the go. And we build pretty quickly with John Stewart, who's been suffering some emotional problems because he let a world die, apparently. I don't know. I'm coming into this fresh at this point. And so he's feeling bad about that, and he goes to seek some sort of counsel or comeuppance with the Guardians of the Universe, which are back on Oa. So he's going. And then we roll into issue 2, Street Demons. This is pretty fun. There's kind of a bit with Guy where Guy's pushing Hal to get into some trouble, so he wrestles up this old villain of the Green Lantern, the Tattoo Man, who's able to make his tattoos come alive. The Tattoo Man has long ago kind of given up his life of crime. He's working the CD back alley as a tattoo artist. He just wants to be left alone, man. And Guy's wrecking this guy's MO just because he happened to find him on a whim. Drags Hal into the problem and kind of lets him finish it, but Hal kind of outsmarts him and works with the Tattoo Man, who ultimately takes over the job that Hal was trying to do, as a working on a boat, basically. And it ends up being kind of the Tattoo Man's kind of like small dream for where he wanted to end up. So it's kind of like a happy little ending for this bit that Guy screwed up with, and really, Guy is the villain in this comic, which is kind of interesting. And then the third issue, which I think this is the perfect pacing for this. The cover oversells it a bit. I mean, look at that parallax esque grin, which I know is coming, but I know it's coming uh, on Hal, and he's knocking out Guy. Basically, Guy's antagonizing Hal a lot. They end up at some diner in nowhere America, and they basically put their rings aside and duke it out. Hal's winning because Guy just he's the heel. He can't be winning, I guess. And Guy's very much a heel here. The guy I've read later in some of the John's Green Lantern and whatnot is he's a jerk, but he's not this obnoxious. He's not this much extra guyness, I guess. So I like the character a bit when he's toned down. And I actually had a friend who, when he introduced me to Green Lantern, his favorite was Guy because of some of the military connections and just kind of enjoying a character that's not just the straight and narrow, but someone who's maybe abusing his power just a little bit. Because come on, if you had the Green Lantern ring, wouldn't you fuck with people just a little bit? Uh, I just think it's really fun. They have some comeuppance. They lose their ring for a moment and have to outsmart a couple of yahoos that uh, end up taking the ring, which is interesting because at this point the mythos of that is different. Like it's their ring. When I'm used to, it's their ring. They can activate it even if it's not on them, and it wouldn't matter. It's kind of assigned to them. At this point, they're actually rings and objects. If people picking up, they can use it. They can't use it as well. It still takes willpower, but everyone has some measure of willpower, and so they have to focus it and use it, and they can. And some of it's getting used to it, which is interesting. I actually think that's more fun. It puts a little more weight on the idea that if they lose the ring, fuck, that could be used against them. It also makes it feel more like a weapon and less like a just uh, I don't know, magical nonsense thing. It puts a little more weight on it, creates a little bit of story potential. Though if you lean on that too much, that'd be the web shooters running out of web, right? You can't do it all the time, but occasionally that's a beat that can be fun and add some tension, and in this case could, like I said earlier, show a bit of a character that you're trying to build up. So maybe if Hal gets knocked out, a side character could pick it up, use it. I'm sure something like that's coming, but yeah. Okay, so it's been kind of this Road Warrior character establishing bit, which is fun for me to read and burn through, but if I had to wait 3 months to get through that, I would have been annoyed. So I have to say, I was really glad when things picked up. Issue 4, those Guardians of the Universe. I want to say Guardians of the Galaxy because I'm just used to that now. These little blue alien guys with fuzzy hairdos, who are supposedly the keepers of the Green Lanterns, whatnot. Apparently disbanded the Green Lanterns, and there was one left in charge of kind of the vestige of what was, and he's gone lonely and gone knuckin' crazy because he's also been left with a lot of power. So he's able to project himself across the universe as kind of a Wizard of Oz kind of thing in the sky, and can do like Green Lantern plus abilities of creation. And he's decided to just start taking bits of planets and smushing them together, kind of like a battle world from Marvel's Secret Wars. But here there's one city on Earth which happens to be the one that Hal ended up in, and a bit from these other alien worlds, one with some like bugs, and the bugs are coming in and like attacking the people. But one thing I like, especially in comparison to like Secret Wars or something, is that instead of these places just kind of ending up there and they just kind of all fall into a way, the humans kind of like don't know what to do, but they also don't understand what's going on. So when these aliens come down, they just think they're under attack. But these bugs think that they're here, their land shifted, and they're defending themselves as well. But they're just doing offensive first. And so, I mean, you kind of end up with a similar situation, but the motivations are all out of like instinctual fear on their side. Because, I mean, imagine if your town was ripped up and right at the edge of town was suddenly like, I don't know, elephant men, and then they started charging. Like, what do you do? Right? There's something about it that just felt a bit more organic and interesting that played through in the storytelling. And quickly, the Green Lanterns get the measure of it, find out this one lantern has gone mad. He's already captured Jordan previously. Or Hal Jordan, sorry, I meant John Stewart previously. And so there's kind of this weird mental connection going. He's kind of using Stewart as a proxy and power outlet because he has one of the rings. So they figure it all out. Here it says return to Oa, but actually the only Green Lantern that has to fly there is Guy, which is interesting. And one thing that DC's notoriously bad at, they're bad at with the Flash and they're bad at with the Green Lantern. That's distance to time relative in a story. So the Flash can go anywhere in a flash, right? So travel time should never actually matter to the Flash. But they make that kind of a component because you have to build drama and whatnot, but really shouldn't be a problem. With the Green Lantern, he can travel interstellar distances in like, a couple frames usually, which means things are happening, then they'll just show up. So it's like, how fast are they flying through space? Because that feels like it would need to be a factor on some level. I mean, it doesn't have to be down to the minute or anything, but like, if they're able to move that fast, are they not able to move fast like the Flash is, only because it's in space that they can like get to velocity or whatever? Like, there's just something there that I want to know. That's the Star Trek bit coming in, right? But I think it's funny. Anyways, we get to issue 6 where it really starts popping off. Champions of the Mad God. So this Guardian has gone knuckin' futs and is just destroying everything, become completely super villainous. And by the end of this issue, he has all 3 of our Earth Lanterns, which are apparently the last lanterns. They just held on to their rings and nobody cared, I guess. Again, coming into this fresh, something happened. And Hal Jordan pulled this move where he did this somewhere in Emerald Dawn, where he flies into the central core battery, which is the core battery that reaches somehow the power to all their other lanterns, which they need to charge every day to juice up their ring. And by flying directly into the central battery, he comes out like supercharged, able to do things he normally wouldn't. And so he does that, and then he comes out to fight this Guardian. And the Guardian's like, haha, didn't you remember the rules changed? And like, I'm a conduit of that power, so you're just like super juicing me, basically. And then you find out that's not actually what Hal was doing, but he kind of knew that's what they think he was doing. But basically, he just did a booster signal to all the other Guardians because they went other places, which we find out in issue 7 when they all come back. And we have this kind of like ho ho moment. They all come back and they're fighting, and then so the Guardians are fighting. It's like a dozen on one, and then the Lanterns go and they start helping the people with the alien situation that's still been going on, which is really cool that they, have the presence of mind to actually be like, oh, we have to deal with the little guy, you're dealing with the cosmic consequences. Again, you get kind of that cool split. And then what we find is like, oh, those Guardians aren't a match for this one Guardian because they lost all their power because they went nowhere. They've been nowhere near the power forever. So they all get stomped. But Stuart still has a connection to the one, so Hal like convinces him to put a construct in this Guardian's mind of being completely alone, the thing this Guardian's trying to fight and is completely afeared of, and it just like snaps the Guardian, and he basically just falls over and dies, I guess. But it works, and what's really cool about that is we had this come up in with Hal Jordan being clever. It's a clever little moment, and most comics and stories like this would kind of be like, oh, they came and they beat him up, that's it. But they kind of play it further, being like, no, there are consequences, and there is power here, and there's power we have to respect that we've built throughout the years. We have to respect that lore, but here's a part where lore and continuity actually make the story stronger because it creates this moment and this shift where we believe it's going to go one way, including the characters, and it doesn't. And they need to do something more interesting and more hinging on kind of the root idea of their powers and what they can do to get through. And I think it's that extra little layer, that extra little wrinkle that really makes this story go to the next level. It is a lot of comics, and I was kind of surprised to see kind of in 1990 that they were doing this long, drawn out storyline. But there's a lot going on here, and a lot of ground gets covered. And in this fight, it's not just like a slugfest. It's good comic storytelling. It's visual, but it's cerebral at the same time. So we kind of end on issue 8, and we're going to be flying into a new status quo by the end of it. That one Mad Lantern, or one Mad Guardian, is kind of down for the count. And these 3 lanterns are going to help rebuild the core. One has to go beyond Earth, one has to go search the galaxy, and one's going to help rebuild on Oa. And so the next few issues are supposed to be guy centric, and I don't know, I'm just really looking forward to it. It's fun how this book shifts and moves, but also takes its time. Like, it's going to shift to a guy thing for a few issues, but it's a few issues, then it's back. But it's like, okay, we kind of made this guy a heel and kind of gave him some problems, but now we're going to take some time with him, right? We come in with Hal kind of wanting to be a man on the road, and we give that story for a while, and then we show why that can't be. It's a book that's willing to take a moment and tell the story and live in a status quo for more than a beat before moving on. And I think it's stronger for it. It's actually been really enjoyable to go back and dig through these. So I'm loving it. I have a lot more Green Lantern on the way, and this box alone to dig through is going to take me a while. Like I said, about 200, and then when I tap on the mosaic, which is like 18 issues, that's there. I'm going to have to find some way to hunt down the annuals. So that's a bummer. But yeah, man, Green Lantern, I'm digging it. And it's fun. Recently, I've been going through, and I mean, you guys know I'm into Spider-Man, and I basically own the high majority of Spider-Man comics. There's a few mini-series I'm missing at this point, a few random one-shots or whatever, chunks of early Amazing, and whatnot, but most everything else, I have downstairs now. I'm working on like my X-Men books, but I mean, like, I have Gen X done. I have X-Men proper through Uncanny after I, unswiss cheese that roll for a bit. I'm gonna have big chunks of it together. Just need a few issues to tie a few dots, and I can really kind of say that. um, Excalibur we have. It's been interesting. It's been fun collecting, but I kind of want to dig in and to start reading and enjoying the stuff that I've been spending way too much money on, and do it. But something about Green Lantern in this moment just caught me and just feels really enjoyable. So I'm gonna keep, hopefully, I don't know, I'll see if there's any reception, but I'm hoping to do some more of these Green Lantern videos. They should be shorter. And then yeah. So that's it for now. Hope you guys are having a good quarantine, and peace.